Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. Today is a Stashing with Stephanie Day where we come out with a brand new fat quarter friendly pattern that you can use either with your Stashing with Stephanie subscription or with any fat quarter set that you have at home or that you can pull from your stash. So today's pattern is called Reflection and it is going to use exactly 24 fat quarters. This is every once in a while we do one where we only size it for one size because the way the pattern works, it works best for that one size. Most of the time we try to do it for multiple sizes so you can make it whatever you want. But this one it's really cool the way it turns out. It works great with a rainbow collection like what we have today, but you could always mix and match and do it more tonal or to match your own decor. Or this could actually be really fun with a lot of like grays and gray to white to black transition as well. That would be also very neat. But today we're doing a rainbow and it's going to look like the quilt is reflecting on each other. It is really kind of fun and I'm really excited about this month's design. As always, you can either get the pattern all on its own over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com, or you can join Stashing with Stephanie and you get access to this pattern and all the others that we've released for free. It's over a $200 value by now with the patterns that you'll be able to download once you join. It's $29.99 a month plus shipping. And for that you get 12 fat quarters for the price of 10. Plus, then we send you a couple of coupons where you can get $10 off a $20 purchase to get some additional yardage. Or we also have been doing lately where you also get 25% off a purchase if that works out to be a better deal for you. And then you can get a finishing kit and everything you need to finish here. Now, this month, it's a little bit different than normal in that since we're doing 12 fat quarters and there's 24 in the line, we're doing A bundles and B bundles. So if you are a member of the club, you've either gotten an A or a B bundle and you need whatever the opposite is in order to create the quilt as we have seen it now. And we did give our subscribers a head start to get this, and it's a limited edition collection. So once we're sold out, that's it. We're not going to be able to get any more. So I wouldn't wait on this. We've done this before and sometimes they go pretty quick. So if you like it, just hop on that and grab your kit if you are not a subscriber, or you can subscribe and get all those goodies. So all that is at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. Now let's take a quick peek at the fabric for this month and then we'll get started on this quilt. We're going to look at the fabric collection a little bit differently than we do normal because this one is just such a bright rainbow that I felt like it looked better all together than looking at just one fabric at a time. This is Midsommar by Pippa Shaw for Figo Fabrics. You may not have heard of Figo before. We've used it once before for our Stashing with Stephanie, but you definitely have heard of Northcott, and that is the parent company. This is their modern line, kind of like Ruby Star Society for Moda and Cotton and Steel for RJR. So a really well-known industry leader in fabric. It's very high quality fabric and it is just really pretty. But the collections trend more modern than the traditional where you're going to find with Northcott. And in this case, it's just got this beautiful rainbow and all these very geometric designs. So we're going to take a peek at some of them. And in this case, there's 24 fabrics in the collection. We're splitting this into an A and a B bundle, and you will need both in order to do this. We're going to do a no neutral quilt where you're just sort of seeing the progression of color. So this is sort of the hero print of the line where we have this very geometric flower pattern. It's very different than last month where it was very watercolor. This is very defined in that. And then you have a lot of these that look like more background where it's just more of a couple colors in there. Here's that big hero print again in the blue colorway. And then you've got some good medium prints. And really that's the sign of a truly great line, is one where you've got a combination of those great hero prints where they look good, really big, and as well as some of these that look good to sort of just blend into the background, because if they all were big, bold, crazy prints and then you didn't have any that were sort of your supporting characters like this, then it wouldn't work. You need to have just a few of the ones like this that stand out and a whole lot more of ones like that don't. And this one pretty with that nice little lighter pink there. And then you get into your oranges and reds. And then we're back around again for the yellow. I really love this. It's more of like a citron yellow. And I just really, that's one of my favorite colors and pops. So that is Midsommar, and that's what we're going to be working with. And we're going to take full use of this rainbow colorway to do this pattern. So the first thing you want to do is arrange your fabrics in rainbow color order. Now I've already done that here, but you know, just remember back to grade school, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, pink. In this case, I kind of started with yellow as my top one, and I've labeled all of these. These are just address labels that you can purchase at your local office supply store, and I just labeled my fabrics 1 through 24. That way I would know what was what and I would be good to go there. And the first thing we're going to do is sew fabric tubes. These are put together Bargello style, which means we essentially are going to make one gigantic fabric tube, and then we're going to slice that apart to create our rows. It's a very efficient way to make a quilt because you can make a lot of rows really quickly and then just start sewing the skinny vertical rows together. So that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to make the first half of the tube, and I'm just going to be sewing, you know, 12 to 11 and so on. So that way we're going 1 to 12 through there. I do just leave these on because they're nowhere near my seam allowance. I put them right smack dab in the middle of that. Also, if you ever end up say you're doing this and it's a skinnier one, you can always just put these this way too, and then it does the same deal. So I'm going to start sewing these together. This is the other really good thing about doing a Bargello quilt is if you are not very great with your 1/4" seam, as long as you are a consistent sewer, like you consistently sew a 3/8" seam or something like that, then you are going to be able to have this quilt fit together, even if your 1/4" isn't perfect, as long as it's consistent. So it will still work if you are still a newbie and you're getting started. So let's get started with sewing. So I'm just going to flip these guys right sides together, and there's one thing that is going to be your biggest tip when you're doing that, and that is when you are lining these up, you want to make sure that you are getting your selvage ends as even as possible, because there's nothing worse than doing a Bargello quilt and then having it end up being a sign of going crooked, because then you're not going to be able to cut as many rows as you need. So in order to avoid that, just make sure that when you're putting these together that you are always lining up your selvage ends to keep those nice and even, and everything will work out for you in the end. All right, so I'm just getting these lined up. I never, when I'm strip piecing, I never pin. I always just line it up, and then I keep everything nice and lined up with the edge of my presser foot here. And then what I do is I just line up my edges, and I will line up just whatever will fit on the top of my sewing surface. I do have an extension table on here, so that gives me a little bit more space. And then I just kind of hold it in place with my fingertip and sew along and let my finger just go on up with those feed dogs. And then when I can't do that anymore, then I just realign everything and sew all the way down. All right, so when you're done, you can unfold that, and then you're just going to grab the next strip and you're going to put it in order. So we've got 12, 10, and now, or 12, 11, and now I'm going to add 10. And line these guys up right sides together and make sure all those selvages are nice and even. So that way we have a nice even edge to trim off when we start trimming to rows. So we can see here that my selvage edges are nice and lined up, and so we're going to have a nice straight edge when we come to trim this down later. So I'm just going to keep on going, adding my pieces, so that way we have that cool color gradation going in that rainbow, and until I've gotten the first half of my tube sewn together. So I almost always press my seams open without fail. I find that you have a really flat seam and a really sharp straight seam. So sometimes when you're doing strip sets like this, they can kind of curve to one side if you don't sew from opposite directions. And even sometimes if you do, they can kind of curve up, and so then you don't get a nice square finish when you're trying to cut apart a tube like this. But what I do is I just kind of open the seam up with my fingers, and with the nose of the iron straight down that center seam, I just press that nice and open like that. And This is easiest to do on a full ironing board. For the sake of the video here, I'm doing it on my little pressing surface, so I'm only doing a little bit here at a time, so you can kind of get the hang of it. And we're going to press from the right side as well, and we're going to use my favorite non-quilting quilting tool. This is a mist aerosol sprayer. It just has plain water in it. You can use your favorite spray starch as well. What it does is it comes out in a fine mist instead of like a little spray bottle spritz. So it's no water droplets or anything like that on your fabric. But when you do that and then you go over it with the iron, it really flattens out that seam and makes it very nice and flat and lovely to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for all of my seams, and then we'll come back and sew our tube halves together. All right, so you can see that my top is pretty straight. There are parts where it goes up and down a little, but it is fairly level, so that is going to be really great when it comes to trimming off. We're not going to have too much waste there. And for this next part, it's really important that you are working on a surface where you can lay your entire piece out, half of your tube, completely flat, because we're going to want to put the other tube on top of that. So I've already sewn this guy together. So I'm going to be matching up my purples with my pinks over here so that they transition into that. And then my blues will match up with my yellows on the other side. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of line this up so that my selvages are nice and even along the tops. And then I'm also going to make sure that my edges are nice and even over here, because this is the side that we're going to sew together, and then of course on the other side as well. And that is what is going to make this tube nice and flat, and we want to make sure that it's not cockeyed. So I'm going to start with one side first. I've made sure that I've got everything laid out nice and flat up top, and then I've got my edges all nice and aligned here. And now I'm just going to go ahead and put some pins in there. So now making sure everything remains nice and even across the top of those selvages. You just kind of want to smooth out so that way you also are nice and even on the edge as well, and that those pieces are right on top of each other. And once everything looks nice and flat, then you can go ahead and pin on your other side. You want to take a lot of care at this step to make sure that everything remains nice and flat and that your edges are all nice and lined up when everything is flat, because if it's not, when you sew it together, your tubes are going to end up a little cockeyed and it's going to be hard to have nice straight rows. So do take your time at this step. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew my 1/4 inch seam down both sides that we have pinned together, and then we're ready to cut this apart into our vertical rows. All right, so I'm just joining my 2 tube halves together that we've pinned together by sewing down both sides. And you want to sew down both sides because what we're going to do is cut this apart into form to end up creating our rows, and everything works out just perfectly, and it is so fast when you do it this way. Now this first cut you kind of have to do a little something special with, and then after that you can cut everything to size that is included in your pattern. Again, that pattern is called Reflection, and you can get it at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. So what I'm going to do here is I am lining up just some inch lines with those seams to make sure that I'm nice and square going across here. Then I'm going to take that measurement that I need to cut to, and I'm going to make sure that I've got a little bit beyond that from where the selvages are. So I can see where this is, everything's sewn right side together. So I'm going to make sure that here's my selvage here, that the measurement I need to cut to is a little bit more than that, but that it is not cutting into where that is. So once I've got everything nice and lined up where I want it to be, and I'm looking pretty square, which I am here, and then I'm gonna go ahead and cut. And this is basically your entire vertical row from the top to the bottom of your quilt, and just in half because we've got our half tubes sewn together. So it is going to definitely be longer than your board here. So you're just gonna cut as much as will fit on your cutting mat and across the board, and then we're gonna adjust and cut some more in a minute. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and pull everything toward me. Again, making real sure that I'm keeping everything nice and flat. All right, so you can see here where that cut was. So what I'm gonna do is line up my ruler with that cut. And then again, making sure things are nice and square, lining up with those seam lines to keep everything nice and square all the way up. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest. From here, the cutting is a lot more simple because we're just going to be cutting two sides. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this around completely. And then what you're going to do is you're going to line this cut edge up with the exact measurement that you need to trim to, and just cut it like it were a regular strip. And then you're going to do the same thing, working your way down the rest of it. And you're going to be able to get enough strips exactly that you need for the quilt. So do be careful that you're not cutting too much extra when you are doing this section, where you may not end up with enough strips. If you don't, you can just make your quilt a little bit narrower. As long as you don't screw up too many of the strips, it's not going to be the end of the world. But you do want to take your time and be careful and go ahead and cut these to size. But this is really nice because we've got an entire row here. And as soon as we get done cutting this, we're going to have enough for about a quarter of our quilt. All the rows done already. And that went really fast. I've been sewing for maybe 45 minutes and I've already got pretty much a quarter of the quilt done. So that is pretty quick, pretty fast. And so you guys can get this quilt together fairly quickly at home as well. All right, so I'm going to finish cutting these and then we're going to come back and I'm going to show you how to trim these tubes apart to create the offset design of the row. And then we're going to show you how to sew those rows together, and then you'll have everything you need to know to complete the entire quilt. All right, so I've got all my rows cut and they look like giant tubes like this. So this is what makes it super fast, because if you had to cut all of these tiny little rectangles and sew all of them together for all of the skinny rows that are in this quilt, it would take forever. But by being able to strip piece entire big sections into giant tubes and then cutting those tubes apart, it makes it go so fast. So now I'm going to show you how we're going to cut apart these tubes in order to create the rows and to get that color change that you want. Now you're going to want to make sure that you are careful with this step, because you don't want to make mistakes, because if you do, you might not be able to use that strip. And again, your quilt might get a little skinnier. So do pay attention. There's a layout diagram that goes with this pattern. It's called Reflection at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. That'll help you keep everything together. All right, so for the next row that I have, I'm getting my quilt together in another area, is there's two types of rows. One is going to have the entire rectangle at the top, and then one is going to have a half rectangle at the top. This is going to be one where I have the entire rectangle. So this one here is going to be the top of my piece. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to make sure that that is correct. So I know that this piece is first in this row and then this one's second. And then I'm going to fold that over, and I'm just going to take a very sharp pair of scissors and I'm just going to cut right along that seam line. And this ends up working out to be the exact same length as when we cut it in the halves. And so that way I've just cut off my seam allowance there, and I'm able to take this apart, and now I've got the piece I need at the top of the row. So now for the next one, that is going to be kind of going down. So what I have for this one is now we're going to have a half. So in this one, it's going to be, I need to cut this guy in half so that way these guys can start traveling down and you have that nice offset and the color changes gradually as you go. So here is the best way that I figured out how to do this. Now I work in a small sewing space. What you see here is my actual sewing room. It's not just a set or anything like that. And I do not have room for a design wall. So often when I am laying out quilts like this, I'm laying them out on a bed or another large surface. But when I'm doing little things like this, I want to be able to not have to walk it back and forth all the time. So what I do instead of iron this in half is I use my Violet Craft steamroller. This is a new old tool and it's been around for a long time, but it's become popular again with English paper piecing. So what I do is I just have this and all my tubes with me in my bedroom, and I've got them laid out on my dresser. And what I do is I fold these guys in half, so that way I can line up these seams right on top of each other and make sure they're lined up on both sides so you get a nice even bit there. And then I can kind of finger press that with my hands, but to get a really great seam, what I do is I just go over that with the seam roller, and then it gives me a really nice crease here that I can use to cut across. So now that I've got that and it's staying nice and secure, I can just take my, again, my really sharp scissors and just go right across that. And now I've got my rows laid out and ready to go. I also use this, so you notice we did not press the sides when we sewed our side seams together to join our tube. So this one here, this seam here, is one of those side seams that has not been pressed. So when I am also getting everything cut apart, what I do is I find those two seams that have not been pressed, and I will first finger press it open, and then I just go over it again, just right on my dresser because it's a nice hard flat surface. I will just go over that seam, and that way I'm able to lay everything out on my bed and I can just start pinning together. Now, I wouldn't consider this like as flat as it needs to be quilted and finished, but it is flat enough to be able to pin it together and sew your row together, and then you'll be good to go. So let's find my other seams. Flatten that out. All right, so now I'm able to lay everything out, pin it together, and sew it just like I would any other row. It's a nice straight row, so it's very straightforward. I usually pin at the top and the bottom, find my middle, and then I'll quarter it up from there. I don't usually use too many pins in a row because we've been pretty straight here, and I generally just don't like to pin in general. But if you can pin as much or as little as you want, just make sure that everything is nice and evenly spaced as you're working on it. Well, that's all you need to know to put together Reflection. Again, we've got single patterns for this. If you don't want to join the club, you can just get the pattern on its own, or you can join Stashing with Stephanie and you get this and a bunch of other patterns that you can download for free. And that also comes with your 12 fat quarters a month for $29.99 a month. Plus, you will get coupon codes where you can get additional yardage or finishing kits. And if you're a member with Stashin', you can definitely get your finishing kit for this. It is just whatever bundle you didn't get. If you got an A bundle, order a B and vice versa. Or if you just really like this and you want to be able to make the quilt, we have full kits as well while supplies last. We did get a lot of extra fabric, but it's a one and done line. So when it's done, that's it. We're not going to be able to get more. So it is really pretty. I love how this turned out, and I hope you guys love it too. Thanks so much. And as always, if you love these videos, a great way to say thanks is to get the supplies from us to make it. And also make sure you like and subscribe here on YouTube. And you can also join our email list to know about all the goody things that we have going on. We don't put everything in the YouTube videos, like to know when we get brand new fabrics. That only goes out in the email so far. So thanks so much for following along. And until next week, happy quilting.